The musty smell of aging paper hung heavy in the air, a scent I'd always associated with comfort and sanctuary. But tonight, the restricted section of the library felt different. A prickling unease crawled up my spine as I traced my finger over the worn spine of an ancient volume, its leather cracked and whispering secrets. Something inside me, a rebellious flicker amidst my usual passivity, made me pry open the faded clasp. A withered rose, its petals brittle and brown, lay nestled within the book's clasp. Tucked beneath it was a note, scrawled on aged parchment in a spidery hand. "Help us find our end." My heart pounded against my ribs. It was absurd, but as I reached out to touch the note, a dizzying sensation swept over me. The air around me shimmered, the rows of shelves blurring into an unrecognizable chaos until darkness. Then I was standing in a dimly lit study, the air thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and a faint metallic tang. A fireplace crackled merrily, throwing dancing shadows across a room cluttered with books, inkwells, and half-finished manuscripts. For a moment I stood stunned, believing I must be dreaming. Then I saw him, Charles Dickens, his spectral form shimmering around the edges, his eyes alight with a mixture of sorrow and manic energy. "You've come," he said, his voice a low rasp. "We've been waiting for you." He introduced me to a swirling cloud that emitted the heartbroken whisper of Mary Shelley and a gaunt figure, perpetually shrouded in shadows, who spoke in the sepulchral tones of Edgar Allan Poe. "We are trapped," the flickering Shelley murmured, "bound to our unfinished manuscripts." "The weight of our stories," Poe added, his voice a dry rustling, "holds us captive." "Only you," rasped Dickens, "can set us free." I stumbled over my words, overwhelmed by the reality of my situation. But, I'm just a librarian," I stammered. Dickens laughed, a hollow grating sound. "The perfect candidate, my dear," he declared. "You possess the quiet strength, the empathy, the keen eye for detail." My limbs seemed to have a life of their own, propelling me towards a desk where a half-written novel lay open. "Begin with this," Dickens urged, pushing a quill into my trembling hand. "Finish what we could not." Days turned into weeks, the boundary between my world and these spectral figures blurring. Their words flowed into my mind, their unfinished stories becoming desperately important to him. I wove their pain, their fears, their hopes, into narratives that gained a horrifying sense of urgency. But something was off. The ghost of Thomas Hardy, his spectral form perpetually shrouded in gloom, became my greatest thorn. His shadow seemed to cast a pall over the entire house, and his words dripped with envy and resentment. "Why her?" he hissed, fixing me with a burning gaze. "A mere nobody entrusted with our legacies. You'll falter. You'll erase our voices, just as they erased us from history." The author's stories grew darker, their pleas for completion turning into desperate cries for escape. In Poe's fragmented work, I stumbled upon an unsettling passage. The shadow man lingers, a devourer of unfinished tales. He watches, waits, his hunger insatiable. Fear began to coil around me, a cold hand constricting my chest. Was this truly about helping them, or were we pawns in something much darker? One night, amidst a storm that raged outside, Dickens's ghastly face tightened, his form shuddering. "He's here!" he rasped, his voice laced with terror. "The shadow man feasts on our unfinished stories." A wave of icy dread washed over me as I felt a presence, cold and insidious, seep into the room. The air grew thick, the shadows danced with malevolent glee, and the author's spectral forms wavered, their cries growing weaker. A voice, whispering in my ear, filled with uncanny familiarity, spoke the words, "And then you'll join them." Now I knew the truth. This wasn't about helping the authors find peace. They were not trapped by their unfinished stories, but were actively helping to feed the Shadow Man. Their pleas for completion were a siren song, a tempting trap. The words danced in my head, fueled by a newfound horror and clarity. I wouldn't let their unfinished tales become mine. With trembling hands, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate courage I never knew I possessed, I continued to write. I wove their stories together, infusing them with their pain, their regrets, their hidden fears, but also with the resilience of the human spirit. I gave voices to the forgotten stories, whispered tales from the margins, and turned their nightmares into a defiant beacon against the encroaching darkness. The air crackled with energy. A blinding light erupted as the author's forms became more translucent, their whispers fading into a chorus of liberation. But as the light subsided, leaving me alone in the echoing silence, a newfound chill settled upon me. The book on the desk, now charred and empty, bore a single chilling inscription: "The story does not end, only transforms." As I returned to my world, back to the musty shelves and familiar routine of the library, I felt a weight settling within my soul. The cycle continued. The unfinished stories were never truly complete, only waiting, breathing, hungering for a new voice to give them shape. And now I was a part of that hungry cycle. The librarian who had yearned for escape had become a prisoner to the whispers of the unfinished tales,